Hi, my name is Zainab, and I worked with Group 4, also consisting of Lucas, Ahmed, Nada, and Riley. And we worked on these three TryHackMe groups, which are public key infrastructure, authentication bypass, and Agent Sudo to explore key concepts in cybersecurity. Each room provides hands-on scenarios that mimic real-world settings, developing both theoretic knowledge and practical skills. Group 4 members will provide a detailed walkthrough of each room, consisting of explaining the tools, techniques, and vulnerabilities involved. This report will deliver a clear understanding of these topics. Public key infrastructure manages detailed um, digital certificates efficiently and trust chains. This room focuses on cryptography and how the two keys, public and private, are paired to secure websites. The certificate components of PKI confirms who a public key belongs to. Attackers can also compromise sites using fake certificates. Authentication bypass focuses on ways website authentication can be bypassed and exploited. Creating a list of valid usernames is one technique used to find authentication vulnerabilities. Brute force by trying a common list of passwords is another technique. Another way to bypass authentication is using logic flow by going through a password reset. And then Agent Sudo focuses on hacking through this room. To do that, enumeration is used to discover open port systems, details using Nmap. Agent Sudo also uses brute force to gain initial access and privilege escalation to gain root access by misconfigurations and outdated software.
All right. So for public key infrastructure, the room has six tasks, but only the last one actually contains the virtual machine and the task you have to do there. So the first thing you end up doing is you have to set up a custom domain in the etc hosts file so that you can pull up the TryHackMe domain. Once you do that, you are provided with user credentials of which you use to log in to show how easy it is to log into the website. Once you do that, you then set up the burp suite so that you can start intercepting DNS traffic. This is so that you can run a script that will try and get into various accounts of which you'll find some credentials. Now, in order to actually intercept this traffic, you have to add your tag box into the etc hosts file, as well as set up manual proxy configuration on Firefox for the lab. Well, for the room, not lab. Sure. Um, Once you set up the the proxy, which the proxy is set up in burp, you can then use the script to generate fake user activity, which exposes some credentials. Once you have these credentials, you'll find one of the two hidden flags in the list of passwords. The other hidden flag is actually in one of the credentials you have obtained. So you'll have obtained credentials with the first hidden flag, and you'll use those credentials to log in, which you'll find that that account in particular has administrator privileges, which means you can manage requests. In these requests, you will find the second hidden flag. Now, there are two other flags. One of them is tied to the given credentials you start with. This one is not very well hidden. It is in plain sight. The second one actually is an interesting case. One of the one of the flags asks you to put the locality of the self-signed certificate. Now, if you set up the manual proxy configuration, it actually stops you from getting this flag. So what you have to do is you have to revert the manual proxy configuration back to the way it was before, and then refresh TryHackMe. Once you do that, the certificate goes back to being a self-signed certificate, and you find the locality flag. Now, why did we choose public key infrastructure? What was the purpose of this? Well, public key infrastructure was chosen because it teaches how public key infrastructure works. It also explains the role of digital certificates in securing websites. The reason we chose this for a challenge lab is because it also shows how these certificates can be spoofed and how websites can be spoofed if they are self-signing their own certificates. This lab also shows how HTTPS uses certificates to create trusted and encrypted connections, and how self-signed certificates can cause these connections to become spoofed, resulting in man-in-the-middle attacks.
Okay, so for this lab, we didn't find any real vulnerabilities in a live system. Instead, we simulated what could go wrong if certain security practices aren't followed properly in a real world situation. The goal was to understand how trust and encryption can break down when certificate security is weak. The first thing we noticed was the website used a self-signed certificate. That means the certificate wasn't issued by a trusted organization. It was created by the site itself. When this happens, the browser shows a warning saying that connection might not be safe. In this lab, we even saw fake details inside the certificate, like location called meowing. In the real world, this is risky because attackers can easily create their own fake certificates that look similar and trick users into connecting to their malicious site. Next, the lab showed how users can ignore browser warnings by clicking accept the risk and continue. This is something people often do just to move forward, but it creates a huge security problem. If users are used to ignoring these warnings, it becomes very easy for attackers to carry out man-in-the-middle attacks, where they secretly intercept private information like passwords. We also simulated DNS redirection by editing the etc host's file. In a real attack, if someone has access to your machine or network, they could redirect your traffic to a fake site without you knowing. That allows them to watch or change anything you do online. It's a medium level risk, but still very important to monitor. Another issue we explored was the lack of certificate pinning. Normally, apps and websites should check that the certificate they receive matches what they expect. In our case, the browser accepted a fake certificate from a website with no warnings at all. In a real world attack, this would allow hackers to impersonate secure sites and steal data. Finally, we were able to capture login credentials like the username and password, even though the site was using HTTPS. This shows that if the certificate can't be trusted, the entire secure connection falls apart. If this was a real business, it could lead to account takeovers or data breaches. That's why this is considered a more of a critical level risk. To prevent these types of risks in the real world, there are several best practices that organizations could follow. First, websites should always use a trusted SSL certificate from a real certificate authority, like, for example, Let's Encrypt. This ensures that users won't see browser warnings and that the certificate is harder to fake. Second, it's important to provide user training. People need to understand why browser warnings matter and how ignoring them can expose their data to attackers. Just one bad habit like that, like always clicking through a warning, can lead to major security issues. Third, organizations should monitor the host files to protect DNS records. This makes it harder for attackers to secretly redirect traffic to fake sites. Next, they should use certificate pinning where possible. This means locking the system to only accept specific known certificates. If anything else is presented, even if it looks valid, it's rejected immediately. Lastly, it's important to enforce HTTPS with HSTS. This forces the browser to always use a secure connection and prevent users from accidentally using an unsafe version of the site. Together, these steps should help ensure that online communication stays private and that users can safely trust the websites they visit.
Hi, my name is Lucas Yang, and I'll be talking about the TryHackMe Room Authentication Bypass. In this room, I looked at the password recovery feature on the support.acmeitsupport.thm portal. Initially, I found that admin user already existed through some brute forcing that I did. That got me thinking that other valid accounts might be discoverable. Then, as seen it in screenshot 2, I used FFUF to fuzz the ticket submission form and started watching how the application responded to different email inputs, which eventually I found that the email Robert, as well as that user Robert, gave a slightly different response, which told me the account was real and worth targeting. Once I found Robert's email during user enumeration, I logged into the support portal with the fake user and account I made, Lucas at customer.acmeitsupport.thm. I then submitted a support ticket, but instead of using my own email, I entered Robert's. Now, this is where the vulnerability is displayed. The app should have verified who was making the request, but it didn't. Instead, it blindly accepted the email field I submitted and then tied the reset token to my fake support account. If you look at the first screenshot, you'll see the HTML source of my ticket page. It says there is a recent email to robert at acmeitsupport.thm. And in the second screenshot, you'll see that same message while I'm still logged in as the fake support account, really proving that the app sent the reset link to the attacker, not the actual owner. So now I have full control of Robert's reset token without needing his inbox or credentials, which really is a serious logic flaw. Using that reset link, I changed Robert's password, logged on my own account, and logged in with Robert's credentials. From there, I checked his support ticket and found the TryHackMe flag, which confirmed I had full access to his account. So here is really the evidence and really the full chain of what happened. Password reset tokens sent to the attacker controlled email. No verification of that email ownership during the reset process. Successful login with victim's credentials after the reset. And I took over Robert's account without ever touching his inbox or without proper validation. This is pretty much textbook authentication bypass. No brute force, no phishing, just abuse of how the app trusted form input and tied reset requests to the login sessions instead of the actual user. I believe that this was the real world. It could lead to full account compromise, data exposure, or even privilege escalation. So this issue of the authentication bypass aligns with the CWE 640, which is a weak password recovery mechanism for forgotten passwords. The system made two key mistakes. One, it allowed attackers to submit a reset request for another user. Two, it linked that reset token to the session of the attacker, not the actual account owner, which in a real life application, this could easily lead to like unauthorized access or even privilege escalation, as stated earlier. To fix this, I would recommend a few steps. First, make sure password reset tokens are tied to verified identities, not just submitted emails. Second, never allow users to control where the reset link is delivered. That should be system controlled and tied to verified accounts. Third, make sure reset tokens cryptographically are secure. Make sure they expire quickly and don't reveal if an email is valid during the workflow.
Hello, my name is Ahmed. I'll be presenting Agent Sudo. I will be walking you through the process, the findings, and how we can secure the system. Uh, this was a black box challenge, meaning I had no prior knowledge, and I targeted all uh, open services, including FTP, SSH, and HTTP. My approach involved three phases: recon to find vulnerabilities, exploitation to gain access and escalate privileges, and post-exploitation to retrieve the flag and document my findings. The result was the discovery of critical vulnerabilities, full system compromise, and retrieval of the final flag, which I'll walk you through next. I began with recon to understand the target. So using Nmap, I found three open ports, FTP on port 21, SSH on port 22, and HTTP on port 80. Next, I accessed the HTTP service, which required me to change the user agent to C using burp suite. This gave me access to directory listing with files like qt.png. I then targeted the FTP service using a tool called Hydra to brute force the credentials, which turned out to be Chris as the username and Crystal for the password. This let me to download files, including qt.png, which became key for the next step. Now that I had access to files via FTP, I moved on to extracting hidden data and gaining system access. I analyzed the qt.png file using binwalk, which showed it containing an zip file using stickhide with passphrase alien, a clue from another file. I extracted the zip and found a message with SSH credentials. Hacker rules as the password. With those credentials, I logged into the system via SSH as the user James, giving me a low privilege foothold to start exploring the system. At this point, I was on the system as a low privileged user, so my next goal was to escalate privileges to root. I checked the sudo privileges and found that James could run bin bash for all users except root. However, the sudo version was 1.8.27, which has a known vulnerability, CVE-2019-14287. I exploited this by running the sudo-user #-1 bin bash command, which bypassed the restriction and gave me root access. As root, I accessed the root.txt file, which contained the final flag. Now, let's dive into the vulnerabilities that allowed this attack, starting with the most severe. First, the FTP service was vulnerable to brute forcing, giving me unauthorized access. Second, the qt.png file hid credentials, leading to credential exposure. Third, the SSH credentials were weak, allowing me to log in. And finally, a critical pseudo vulnerability. Let me escalate to root. These critical vulnerabilities need immediate action due to their high risk. Uh, for the FTP issue, we should disable it if it's not needed or restrict access with a firewall. We also need strong passwords and ideally switch to a secure protocol like SFTP. For the pseudo vulnerability, we must update to a version later than 1.8.28 to patch the issue. We should also audit the sudoers file to ensure users only have the permission they need to keep the system updated. These high severity issues should be addressed within a week to reduce risk. For the hidden data in the image, we need to stop storing sensitive information in public files. We should also validate files to detect hidden content and restrict directory access using tools like htaccess. For the weak SSH credentials, we need to enforce complex passwords, enable multi-factor authentication, and monitor SSH logs for unusual activities. That's it. Thank you.
In conclusion, Group 4 learned a lot of practical hands-on experience in different cybersecurity areas by working through the public key infrastructure, authentication bypass, and Agent Sudo rooms. These rooms offered extensive insight into both offensive and defensive strategies to incorporate into real-life cybersecurity practices. PKI practices, user education, securing network communication, and secure authentication design are very important to preventing credential theft.